in the Jungle. I'm Matt Edwards. Our guest today, celebrating all weekend long, or I guess the past 48 hours long anyways, Lindsay Patterson. She writes for All Bengals. She does everything. I mean, if you're a Bengals fan at this point and don't know who she is, maybe you don't have the internet, which doesn't explain how you're listening to this podcast. Anyways, Lindsay, how we doing down there?
You know what? Everything's good right now. I don't know what's going to happen in 2 weeks, but right now in the Queen City, everything's good.
I've been trying to say that all year long. Like the Bengals have already exceeded so many expectations, and especially now that they've won the division. Taking it day by day, I don't even want to think about the playoffs. I want to soak this up. I mean, we're recording this at noon on a Tuesday. 48 hours ago, everyone's still kind of on pins and needles, yet here we are. I just didn't think this team would be in this position so soon. I thought we had to wait till next year to go into the final. I mean, they're going into the final game of the season competing for the number one seed.
It's wild to think about because I think a lot of people thought the way that you just said that it was going to be a 2022 season, that this team was really going to start to compete when you think about postseason, the AFC North. Obviously, the Cleveland Browns, Baltimore Ravens were favorite going into this season. I didn't have the Bengals finishing last in the AFC North. I thought they would finish at best third because I knew the roster that the Steelers had. I still felt it was pretty old. But I think right now, when you look at it, you have to eventually think they have the quarterback. Peter King said it to me the other day. When you have a quarterback, anything is possible. But when you have a top 5 quarterback right now in his first full season in the NFL, this team can win, and they're healthy, knock on wood. Their offensive line is dealing with some injuries right now, but overall, when you look at the AFC playoff picture, they're in pretty good health.
Yeah, and that's been a huge component that they've dealt with for seemingly the last 5 years. I mean, you look at, I don't know that I want to say I ever feel bad for Baltimore, but you certainly look at them this year, and they're kind of, their fan base and John Harbaugh to an extent will kind of talk about those injuries. Welcome to what the Bengals have been dealing with for pretty much the past 5 years. But that's been a huge factor in the fact that they are the division champions. And now they kind of have an opportunity here going into week 18 in Cleveland. What do you think? I was going to get to this later, but since it came up, what does Zach Taylor do this week? Obviously, Quentin Spain's going to sit, but should Joe Burrow play? I mean, I guess how much would you think about weighing the playoff seeding versus being healthy in that wild card game?
I think Saturday is going to be a factor with the Saturday game to see where the seeding is Sunday. And, you know, they got in luck with that. They can see what happens to decide what they're going to see when it comes to their starters. I wouldn't be surprised if Zach Taylor had Joe Burrow go for a series or two, or maybe a quarter. If they're not playing for much movement in the playoff picture or in the playoff seeding, I wouldn't let Joe Burrow touch the field. He'd be on the sidelines. Look, Brandon Allen had experience in some of these regular season games. Obviously, it would be a milestone for them to get to 11 wins on this season, but you are going to face a Browns team who are also dealing with injuries. You're more than likely going to face a backup quarterback who might be better than Baker Mayfield right now. So it depends on what you really see with that matchup. But I say, depending on what happens Saturday with Kansas City, I would more than likely sit Joe Burrow just because of kind of how the game ended versus Kansas City. Yes, he said he's fine. Yes, he's dancing. He has a cigar in his mouth and he looked like, hey, this guy's going to be just fine when it comes to the playoffs. But look, I don't want to go back on Cincinnati luck and something crazy just happening in the last season of the game when it really doesn't matter, when you've already clinched your division and you're going to go to the postseason, play a home playoff game. I think we'll find out before 1 p.m. kickoff what this team's going to do and we'll know. But I think you're risking it putting Joe Burrow out there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't want to push any luck at this point. And Brandon Allen, a very competent backup quarterback. And I'm with you. Right now, the Baker Mayfield that I've seen, I'd rather face him than Case Keenum. I mean, you can say it's whatever. I mean, that game in Pittsburgh last night, I don't know how much you watched, but my goodness, that's as bad. I mean, you could have swapped his uniform with like a 5th-round rookie from this year playing for Jacksonville, and you wouldn't have known the difference. That was brutal in Pittsburgh last night. Go ahead.
I think when you look at the AFC North quarterbacks, you are just hoping that Baker Mayfield is in Cleveland next year. I know he has a good record versus Cincinnati, but I mean, he's struggling this season.
Yeah, and the Browns come Sunday, I can't imagine any of them. If the Bengals can go out there and get a couple quick scores, if they can get up 14-0, I mean, they're just going to quit. That team is in such a bad position right now that the Bengals really, they go out and play for a reason, but really should have no issues going into Cleveland and getting a win. And let's not forget that the Bengals aren't going to forget they embarrassed them at Paul Brown Stadium, a month or two ago. So before we get too much into Cleveland, it's the third week in a row. The Bengals put 3 wins together for the first time all season in a row. The Denver win, they play defense to win. And then Baltimore, they go and we all know 525 yards passing for Joe Burrow. They just bury Baltimore's defense. And now here for the third game in a row, they go with a different way of winning. And good teams find ways to win. Great teams make adjustments and find different ways to win. This week, they said, all right, we're going to keep the ball away from Patrick Mahomes. They literally said, Joe Burrow, you're going to play a little defense too, because you're going to keep Mahomes off the field. Am I getting too far ahead of myself? I mean, 3 games in a row, they've won in a different way. And it's not like they've played Houston, Jacksonville, and whoever else is terrible this year, the Jets.
I say credit to Zach Taylor, because a lot of people look at the Denver game and they're like, Joe really didn't have the numbers. It really wasn't a Joe Burrow type of game, but they played it the way they needed to against a really good Broncos defense. And they got the win. I mean, it wasn't pretty, but the win still counts the same at the end of the season. Then obviously everyone has talked about the Baltimore Ravens, the practice squad players, but they went out and they did what they're supposed to do against those bad teams or teams dealing with injuries. Then you look at this game, and the Cincinnati Bengals are a second half team, which is just really crazy to think about. I mean, you think about the Marvin Lewis era and his teams and halftime adjustments. We just really never saw that. But with Zach Taylor, they want to put points on before they go into the locker room. And then they just come out and they weren't conservative. The Jamar Chase touchdown to start the third quarter was just how you want to make a statement. But I think what's so crazy about how that second half went and just saying, Joe Burrow, this is going to be your game. You're going to win this game for us, because obviously the defense struggled early versus Kansas City. And they did with 6 minutes on the clock. I still cannot believe they were able to take that much time off the clock. And if you go to some of the play calls when they're going for it on 4th and goal, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I wouldn't have done that. I was kicking the field goal, but they didn't want any time on the clock for Patrick Mahomes either. So just the way they handled it, it was Joe Burrow's game. They've let Joe Burrow just take control and let him cook. And I think you look at the beginning of the season against the Green Bay Packers or some of those games that were close and they struggled with. I mean, Joe was easing his way back into this offense. And right now they're really starting to connect with his weapons. Jamar Chase looks so comfortable out there. T. Higgins, he was battling injuries early in the season and he looks like he can be a number 1 receiver too. So good problem to have with the way this offense is going. But yeah, I just think that they're just letting this game be decided depending on what defenses they're facing. And that's something we really haven't seen in the past with Bengals teams. They're just like, okay, you're just going to do the best you can against this team with who you have. And with Joe Burrow, he's your weapon. He's your weapon at quarterback. And he looks so comfortable out there. So I would give credit to Zach Taylor for the game plans, but they showed on Sunday that they're going to let Joe Burrow handle it.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I mean, I've complained on here plenty of times before, and throughout my life, I think we all appreciate what Marvin Lewis did in Cincinnati, but the Bengals were so content back then to go up 10 or 14 and just sit on the ball. And you can't, as the NFL's evolved, you can't win that way. And they were still trying to do it. By the way, I wanted to point out, in 6 of their last 7, the Chiefs had only surrendered 14 points or less. The Bengals went out and dropped 34 on them on Sunday. Again, one of those things where you look at certain aspects of what they've done and it's like, all right, but then you compile them all together and you realize just how special this team is right now. So they beat the Chiefs. We're going to need to know what Kansas City does Saturday for seeding. Who do you want to see? Who do you want to see in that? Assuming a lot of things have to go right for the Bengals to get the 1 seed and get a bye, that would be great. But assuming they're playing on Wild Card Weekend, do you have a preference which opponent you'd like to see come to Paul Brown?
Man, we haven't been talking about this in 6 years, because I remember these conversations from 2011 to 2015. Who do you want to see? Who do you want to see? And at the end of the day, you're going to see good teams. It's the postseason. I think people might not agree with this. And obviously if the Colts are in, I'd take them over, you're facing Carson Wentz. I trust the defense on that. And I'd take Joe Burrow when it comes to outscoring him. But I think it's going to be the Patriots. And yes, Bill Belichick is on the other side, and that's terrifying. But at the end of the day, I mean, I look at the QBs, and some would say defense wins championships. It's about points. And I wouldn't want to face Joe Burrow right now. He's just in a different kind of mindset. I think Kirk Herbstreit said it the best. Like, he's just out there to destroy anybody, and anybody who doubts him. They've been underdogs for quite some time this season, and I want to see him in the playoffs. What kind of Joe Burrow are we going to see? Is it the LSU type of guy in the playoff run when it comes to the championships and all of that? But I would say Patriots. I want Kansas City, if they're going to face the Bills at some point, I want them to knock each other off. I don't want to see Josh Allen in the postseason. I know a lot of people want to see the Kansas City Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals in another rematch. I'm not ready for that yet. It will more than likely happen, and who knows what's going to happen in round 2. But yeah, I'm going Patriots, and maybe that's not a great take. And if they somehow can face the Raiders, if the Raiders win and they're in next week, that wouldn't be too bad, because I don't think that they're that great.
Now, are the Patriots the team you want to see, or the team you think they'll see?
You know what I'm saying. I'm saying I think they're going to see the Patriots. So if this is how it worked, I'll say this, because they're not all in yet. Say the Colts are in, that's the team I want to see. Or if the Raiders win Sunday versus the Chargers and they're in, those are the 2 teams I want to see. I just want them to get over the wild card hump, because I know a lot of people know they're up for the number 1 seed. They can get the number 1 seed. That's more than likely not going to happen. But I would say in the first round, I would want to see the Colts or the Raiders, and both aren't in yet. So it's kind of like a tough call until Sunday's games happen for me.
Absolutely. Colts and Patriots, mathematically, they're probably going to see one of them. But all of the way, including Pittsburgh and Baltimore, there are still scenarios where Pittsburgh or Baltimore could come to Paul Brown Stadium on wildcard weekend. New England is the one team I don't want to see, just because of Bill Belichick and his experience in the playoffs. Look, as much as we love the Bengals right now and as good as they are, teams who get to the playoffs for the first time often struggle that first year. I mean, as good as the Rams have been recently, I remember 4 or 5 years ago, they were just mowing down people in the regular season. They get to the playoffs and get beat at home by the Falcons. It's just something you see a lot with young teams. Now, the confidence of Joe Burrow and the confidence of this team right now, I don't think they're going to be afraid of anyone. I'd like to see the Chargers come back to Paul Brown Stadium. That's not out of the question, just because I feel like everyone in Cincinnati knows they were the better team. And I think they're the better team on the field that day, and just kick themselves over and over. And I think the Bengals would really thrive on the opportunity to have another shot at them.
I think a lot of people look at that game and maybe they're casual when watching it, or they look at the box score and they're like, oh man, Cincinnati just got slammed by the Chargers. And that's not what happened at all. It was more of a when it rained, it poured, kind of like we saw early on against the Cleveland Browns in that game at Paul Brown Stadium. They were giving the ball to the Chargers, and the Chargers almost gave the game away. I say when Cincinnati, Joe Mixon, who rarely fumbles it, when they were going down the field, they were either going to score 6 or kick a field goal. If he doesn't fumble it, they were winning that game. It was the third quarter, but they were going to win it. They were going to take the lead, and I didn't see them looking back. But yeah, that's another one that they would like back. And no, I wouldn't mind it. I'm excited this weekend that there are a lot of scenarios like Cincinnati. They're in, they're winning, they're a home playoff game. But the other ones who are still trying to get those last spots, I think that's going to be really fun to see, who that final spot's going to be when it comes to the wild card in the AFC. But yeah, Chargers could be watching from home or they're in. So yeah, the rematch of that would be pretty good. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to watch playoff football and it matter in Cincinnati again.
Yeah, it's going to be Bengals play at 1. I thought they might get moved to 4 because there still is seating implications, but they play at 1 and then 4:00. It's all, I'm going to be on the Red Zone channel. I'm going to be hopefully not sick by then. By the way, I don't even know if I said, I apologize for my voice. Lindsay's putting up with me. I sound a lot worse on the microphone than I do in my head. I apologize. 'Tis the season. It's a regular cold. I'm a throwback. I'm a vintage guy. I just have a regular sickness. So, what are you going to do? I had COVID during the Super Bowl last year. So this year when the Bengals are there, I'll be able to travel not sick. So, okay. We'll worry about the playoffs and when we figure things out a week from now. I will say this team, as healthy as they've been, relatively speaking, this year, and the way they're playing right now, I feel like it will be crushing for the fan base. And I said, this is the last thing I'll really say about the playoffs for now, because I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. They still got the Browns. It will be crushing if they don't get a win this year. And I'm sure there's a lot of people on the outside seeing, who they have coming up or who they potentially could play, and as hot as they've been. But we know if you follow this team, they've broke our hearts too many times. There's no way that they could lose the game this year and it not just be, other than maybe one of the two Pittsburgh playoff games, like the most crushing loss of my lifetime.
If you do go back to the 2011, 2015, just the whole streak it was injuries. I mean, 2011, they backed into the playoffs. No offense to Andy Dalton and AJ Green. They got a lot of help. They go to the playoffs their rookie year. But I will always remember the Colts game when they were playing at Lucas Oil, and they had no starters really as playmakers that were available for that game. I mean, it was brutal, and they still kind of kept with it in the first half, but you knew.
And that's when Andrew Luck was really heating up, by the way, too, 2014.
Yeah. And then obviously 2015, I know how people feel about Andy Dalton, but he was having himself an MVP season prior to the injury. They don't have him in the playoff game versus the Steelers. So there are plenty of games to look at from 2011 to 2015 to be like, those rosters had either no business playing in that game, or if they were able to survive it, and they almost did against the Steelers in 2015 with AJ McCarron, who did not have a good game, whether people want to hear that or not. And now this season, I mean, look, you look at some of the teams in the playoffs right now, they are probably the healthiest team. If you have Joe Burrow out there, you have all of your playmakers, your skill position players. Defensively, I still think that is the biggest shock of 2021, 2022, of just how they've been able to play the free agents who have stepped up, the Trey Hendrickson sighting. So yeah, I mean, you can't ask for a better roster right now. And if they get Quentin Spain back in the playoffs, that would be huge when it comes to the guard position. Obviously, weakness is going to be the offensive line. It was the offensive line going into the season. But other than that, they should be pretty good.
Yeah, and the offensive line just needed to stay healthy. I mean, their starting five, not bad, but you don't see the starting five from week 1 typically still playing by week 8, let alone week 18. So, to be where they're at, and Jackson Carman has played decent here these last few games when he's been in there, we'll see what happens. One more thing I got to point out, and this is maybe like a nerdy Bengals fact. Isn't it crazy that like when Marvin came in 2003, their first like game to put themselves in that national spotlight was the 2003 game against the 9-0 Chiefs, the Chad Johnson, I guarantee it game. Peter Warrick was a monster in that game. And here we are, 18 years later, once again, they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And once again, they're the darlings of the NFL again. Just something I had to point out. The coincidence, irony, whatever you want to call it, was not lost on me there.
I think when you go back to just the week leading up to the Kansas City game, you've watched the NFL plenty of times. You've watched the Cincinnati Bengals plenty of times. Rarely do games live up to the hype. And I thought that going in, I'm like, they're not going to win this game. Hopefully they make it a good game. We're not going to get a classic between Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow. I know everybody wants to see that, but for it to go the way it did, and for it to all to happen at Paul Brown Stadium like that, because look, you can go back to the Bears game, Jets game, Chargers game, Niners game, and be like, they should have won that game. They would be the number 1 seed right now. And they wouldn't be worrying about the AFC North because they would have had it already secured. But for everything to happen the way it did, and for it to be at home at Paul Brown Stadium against the best team in the AFC, was just crazy to think about with Joe Burrow. And it just kind of reminds you like the night of draft night when they picked him, like, this is why he's going to win playoff games. He's going to win championships here. And it to be against Kansas City, I don't think you could ask for a better storyline going into the playoffs.
Absolutely. And it's a great confidence boost for this team going in. All right. Real quick, I'll say for the Bengals to get the 1 seed, for those who aren't aware, they need Kansas City to lose. They need Tennessee to lose. And then they need either New England to lose or Buffalo to win, plus, of course, the Bengals winning. And that is how they would get the number 1 seed. So Kansas City losing on Saturday is the first thing. Tennessee plays the Texans, who have won 2 of 3, and by the way, beat the Titans in their first game this year. So let's not write that one off all the way. And then New England losing, probably not going to happen. Buffalo winning, however, likely does happen. So I don't think it's crazy to think the Bengals get the number 1 seed, but we can't really worry about that. You can worry about it if you want, but it's not going to get you anywhere. All right, Lindsay, you ready to do our rapid fire segment here?
Let's do it.
And then I'll let you get on is it nice down in Cincinnati? I'm in Columbus.
It's beautiful. It's going to snow this week, so I'm a little excited about that.
I love snow. I can't wait, but the sun is shining today. Let's get into some rapid fire. First one, do you have a New Year's resolution?
I don't believe in them. Just do your best and be better than you were the year before.
Me too. I'm not going to wait around 365 days to make a new resolution. If I want to do something, what if it's April and I decide I want to, start eating more carrots or whatever. I'm not going to wait until December 31st to do that. Where does Antonio Brown play next year?
Oh my goodness, this is such a great question. A lot of people are saying that he's going to end up on the Kansas City Chiefs, but for me personally, I wouldn't even mess with it. He will play again. I truly believe that because in the NFL, if you're talented, a team will get you, especially in the postseason, if they can grab you. And I think Kansas City would more than likely be his landing spot.
Oh my goodness, between Tyreek, Josh Gordon, and AB, wouldn't they become some darlings? Okay, where does Baker Mayfield play next year? I still think it's Cleveland, by the way. I think that between the injuries and what else are they going to do? I mean, you kind of have to see it. And they've already picked that option up. But it's not out of the question that they could work something out either. I don't think he would be mad about leaving Cleveland at this point.
Yeah, I could see Cleveland just staying in Cleveland. At the same time, I think that they are going to just point to, look, the guy was beat up. He was dealing with injuries. Every NFL player is dealing with injuries throughout the season. So I think they might point to that a little more. But yeah, probably just stay in Cleveland.
Yeah, and Kevin Stefanski, by the way, speaking to the media again at 1:30, which that doesn't seem normal after he just talked to them last night after the game. So we'll see what he has to say there. The Cincinnati Bengals are 3-0 when your mom is at Paul Brown Stadium. Should Zach Taylor hire her on his staff?
No, not at all. My mom is optimistic. She knew, she's like, they're going to win. They're going to win by a couple of scores. That did not happen. She's just optimistic and hoping she can continue that streak in the postseason.
All right. They got a lot of optimism at PBS. So, maybe she doesn't get hired on the staff. Maybe she just comes in and consults sometimes. Give me a sneaky Bengal to watch during the playoffs. I'll give you a second to think about it. This is a tough one just because there's Tyler Boyd's the number 3 receiver. No one's going to be surprised. Most teams, if the number 3 receiver were to have 8 catches for 140 and a touchdown, it'd be a surprise. Not the case in Cincinnati. I'll say Drew Sample, and here's why. He's on the field a decent amount. Joe Burrow checks out of plays a decent amount. And with all the attention on everyone they've got, he's just going to get some opportunities to get open. I don't know that will happen, but he's a guy who's out there enough where if he ends up catching a big touchdown, those of us who pay attention, I don't think will be surprised. What do you think?
A lot of people will be like, this is not surprising who I'm going to stay with. And I'm going to go into the tight end room too. I'll go CJ Uzama. And it's the only reason I say that is because, as you mentioned, there's T. Higgins, there's Tyler Boyd, there's Jamar Chase. And I feel like Drew Sample does get criticized when he shouldn't get criticized because I think he's a good blocker. But I'm going to go with CJ. I feel like he'll have a couple key catches and a touchdown. He'll find himself in the end zone and they will focus a little bit over on his end.
Fair enough. Big tight end games coming up potentially. Who knows? We'll see. Joe Burrow is going to find them if they're there. We know that much. I think we already addressed this. What's your biggest concern heading into the playoffs? Do we agree offensive line?
It's offensive line, 100%. But the thing is, Joe Burrow, he has to be sure he's not taking some of those sacks on his own. And I think if he continues to adjust with that and gets the ball out, they'll be fine and he'll make it work.
Yeah, his pocket presence this last month. I mean, it's one of those things where it's so easy to be at his level and be stubborn, but he looked at it, he diagnosed it, and he fixed it seemingly overnight. Kind of crazy. Who should be the ruler of the jungle at the playoff game? Did they throw your name in the hat?
I don't want that at all. No pressure.
Why not? It looks fun.
They would be like, who the heck is this? I'll go Boomer. He's an OG. They obviously had Chad Johnson. Offensive linemen have been pretty big. Some of the older guys, but I'll go Boomer. Bring a QB back.
Boomer would be great if we can get him out of the CBS studio on West 57th in Manhattan.
That's true. They wouldn't like that very much, but maybe they can, how it is. It's 2022, 2021. They're doing everything virtually. So maybe they'll allow him to be at Paul Brown Stadium.
Yeah, I guess it would kind of depend on what time the Bengals were to play. If they were to play in that later game, then we could fly him to Cincinnati, be the ruler of the jungle. I would love to see Boomer there. Boomer, one of the all-timers. Last question's vague. And I apologize for it, but it's so difficult to know, right? What happens in Cleveland Sunday? Do we have any idea? I feel like this is the one game where I can say the Bengals have no excuse not to win, but we have no idea who's playing. Have you ever felt so baffled about what we're going to see and what's really kind of a meaningful game if things go the Bengals' way elsewhere?
Yeah, I'm going to say Brandon Allen is going to play in this game the majority of the snaps, and I say they win. I say they won in a not so pretty 21-17 game. I think Cleveland's still there. Obviously, these guys are playing for jobs. And Brandon Allen, he has an okay day.
And I'd love to see him get a little work in there too. That'd be good for him. And who knows what Browns team we're going to see. They're either going to give it everything or they're going to have their minds on Cancun already. It's tough to say. Lindsay Patterson, I appreciate you joining us so much. She's on Twitter at LNDS Patterson. Maybe you're already one of her 28,000 followers. If you're not, you can be today. It's very easy. It's a free website, actually. Lindsay, anything else you want to tell people? Tell them about you. You said you just talked to Peter King. Where can they find that?
It'll be on Sports Illustrated. Actually, the following week, I'm doing a pre-record now. I have an interview with Jeff Schwartz, former offensive lineman in the NFL. That'll be out this week over on Sports Illustrated. Peter King's coming next week. We'll talk everything playoffs, and it's fun to talk Bengals football and no draft talk in January.
Yeah, it's been a while and it feels good. We look forward to it so much. Lindsay, I appreciate you joining me as always. Always very insightful, very fun to talk to. I hope you have a happy new year, and I hope maybe we'll do a Super Bowl preview. We'll find out. Am I getting too far ahead of myself? I probably am.
No, dream big. I'm ready.
Dream big. I love it. All right. My name's Matt Edwards. You've been listening to In the Jungle. If you like it, tell a friend. If you don't, go listen to Lindsay's stuff. It's better anyways, but there's plenty of time to do both. We appreciate it. We'll see you back here at the end of the week as we get ready to finish off the regular season.